Hello and welcome to Shutter Study. Now over the past 3 episodes we've taken a look at the different elements of ISO, aperture and shutter speed and how they affect the elements in the exposure triangle. Today we're going to have a closer look at when you combine these elements together to get the best elements out of manual control. When it comes to controlling all 3 elements, it's trying to find a balance between each one and how each other can not cancel each other out and improve your photo. The first thing to do is set your ISO, which is the sensitivity of your sensor. If it's bright and sunny conditions, then you want to aim around ISO 200 or 400. If it's low light conditions or dark, then you want to aim around 1600 or 3200, but keep in mind that the higher ISO will lead to a grainier image. The next thing to do is to set your aperture, as this will control the input of the light as well as your depth of field. So you have to ask yourself, what sort of image will you take? Is it going to be something like a portrait, macro, scenic, landscape? You have to ask yourself what is going to be important. What is the story you're going to tell? If you want to be having a blurred background effect to create emphasis on your picture, then set it to a low aperture. If you're going to be having a busy scene and want to tell more within the frame, then set it on a higher aperture. Now that you have your ISO and aperture set, the main question is what to set your shutter speed. The shutter speed is going to be based around the scenario, just like with the ISO. Bright and sunny conditions will require a faster shutter speed, while darker will require a slower shutter speed unless you're using a flash. If you're going to be shooting handheld, it's recommended to not go any slower than 1/30th of a second, as this will create motion blur effects and may ruin your overall picture. If you're going to be going for longer than that, then it's recommended to use a tripod. Manual photography is going to be very trial and error based, so if your image is appearing too bright and too dark, here's some suggestions to try and get the best out of the situation. If the sense of motion has been captured perfectly but the image is appearing too dark, then you may want to consider adjusting the ISO. If your depth of field seems too big or too small, then you will want to adjust the aperture. If your image is appearing too blurry or too sharp from motion, then it's best to adjust your shutter speed. While manual photography may seem intimidating at first, there are 2 steps below that you can do to help adjust you into the methods. There's shutter priority, aperture priority, and program. These will particularly help you out in helping understand how the camera works and how to create the best when it comes to manual photography. In program mode, it automatically sets the aperture and shutter speed for you, but chooses different options to get the same results. If you take notes of these, this will help apply them to manual setups. Under shutter priority, you have full control setting the shutter speed and the camera automatically sets the aperture. Again, if you take notes of these, you help create the balance around your photographs. This also applies to aperture priority, where the roles are reversed and you control the aperture instead of the shutter speed. If you use these modes before jumping into manual, then you get a full sense of how the exposure triangle works. Another handy device that's also helpful to use if you don't want to use the camera to set your bearings is using a light meter. This particular device will give you a reading and make a suggestion based on the scenario you're in to get the best results for your images. If you have any further questions regarding the exposure triangle, feel free to post them in the comments below, ask on our Facebook, Twitter or Tumblr. If you'd like to learn more with Shutter Study, please subscribe.